When you speak of, I guess it's something like 100 trucks that have children in them, and you're saying the CAS is involved, are you requiring that they somehow are able to remove the children from the trucks? I mean, what would be the next steps for police in terms of, moving on any of those trucks if you're concerned about kids?
We identify that concern for us. It's something that has come to us early in the course of this occupation. We observed through members who are moving around within the crowds that they began to saw children, families that were actually had attended here to take part in the occupation. It's something that greatly concerns us. It's something that concerns us for the well-being of everyone within the area, from the risk of carbon monoxide and fumes, the noise levels that we know are experienced by the neighboring areas, as well as the people that are right in the occupation. We're concerned about cold. We're concerned about access to sanitation, the ability to shower. There's a multitude of concerns. That's why we're raising it and identifying it as something that is something we need to address. We need to have discussions with our partners in the Children's Aid Society about how we manage moving ahead. We're not at the stage of looking to do any sort of enforcement activity around that. We'll rely on the Children's Aid Society to help provide and give us guidance around that. We just think it's an important factor that complicates and makes this an even more challenging operation that's important that people are aware of.
How much difficulty does the fact that people are bringing in water in these fuel tanks, how much difficulty does that put on the Ottawa Police Service in terms of enforcement?
It does provide a layer of logistical complexity to us. If the number of gas cans going in, it creates challenges for us to actually conduct searches, to stop and conduct searches, ultimately seize those gas cans and the fuel in them, and potentially charge someone as a result of that. The other thing it does for us is identifies a level of sophistication and a level of ability of this group to try and subvert police efforts. That's concerning to us. We know where we continue to have discussions with the demonstrators about the occupation. We are actively looking to find remedies and resolutions to end this. But we know that as they harden in their position and as they try and engage in activity that subvert our efforts, it's quite concerning to us.
You mentioned off the top that several of the vehicles that are parked downtown have been immobilized. We've heard of reports of vehicles having their tires or their wheels taken off, that sort of thing. How does that affect your abilities to start to remove these vehicles? I know the city's also had trouble getting towing companies to cooperate. In terms of actually moving the vehicles that are blocking streets out of the downtown, what are your next steps, and when can we see more of that action taking place, given the situation?
The immobilizing of the vehicles in the occupation area is extremely concerning to us. You're absolutely right. We've seen vehicles that have had their tires taken off. We've seen larger vehicles that we know have had their brakes bled to make them rendered immobile. We identified early on there's many layers of complexity to dismantling this occupation. One of them is the sheer size of it. It covers, as we know, many blocks within our city's downtown core. The other challenge is the size of the vehicles. When you add the complexity of active attempts to interfere with any of our ability to remove them, it just adds that extra layer of complexity. What I can tell you is it's something that we're absolutely considering. It's something we're planning around. And ultimately, at the end of this, when the occupation is over and people go home, we know that we're going to have to do some cleanup in that area, and we're making operational plans to actually achieve that.
So we know we've heard a lot about the need for additional officers, 1,800 more personnel, but looking at all the options available to the police in the criminal code, powers potentially granted by the courts or declarations by the province or the federal government, does the Ottawa Police Service currently have all the legal authority that you feel you need to end this protest, or are there additional powers or authorities you're going to be seeking to acquire before this can officially be routed and ended?
As we indicated very early on in the early days of this, everything is on the table for us to consider in terms of options. You are absolutely right. There are several legal avenues that we need to explore and continue to explore. As part of our ask in resources to come and assist us, it is not only uniformed officers to be engaged in our frontline, front-facing activities. We have within there lawyers, legal competencies that we're seeking from various different agencies, including Transport Canada, the Ministry of Transportation Ontario, experts in insurance, experts in licensing and registration of these types of vehicles, these types of large trucks. So we do know there are several avenues for us to explore. We've brought together an investigative strategy that looks at all of those different avenues, and we will use everything within our means that currently exists and explore anything else that we need to have added to our toolbox to hold the people that are engaged in this accountable.
I was just wondering if you can give us any kind of updated timeline. Do you expect the protest to continue through this weekend? Do the police have any kind of new operating timeline, any expectation?
From the beginning, we have never identified timelines for this. We want this occupation to end as soon as possible. We want these demonstrators to pick up, realize that their message has been heard, and go home to where they came from so that our citizens can have their city back. We feel we deserve this, and our citizens are very loud in calling for this to end. We continue to work every day to as expeditiously and safely end the occupation so the citizens of Ottawa can have their city back.
How many in-house heavy tow trucks does OPS and the city have? And are those resources in play, or have they been ruled out because of any safety concerns in the red zone?
As with any sort of policing operation, we don't give out specific numbers around how we're going to engage in any sort of enforcement activities. So what I can tell you is we continue to work with the city and local tow truck providers to look at how we can access the number of heavy tows that we would need in the event that we have to move vehicles out of the downtown core. And we've expanded that through our city manager and our city partners to look not only at our city, but how can other cities and other municipalities help to support us in those efforts.
What's the strategy for fuel right now? Are we going to stop everyone that we see with jerry cans, or do we want to do more organized, more bigger operations to try to get more logistical spaces where there's more fuel that is stored? Because we're seeing a lot of jerry cans walking around. So what can you tell us about that?
We don't have a strategy around that. We have multi-prongs to our enforcement strategy that we're employing. We put out a statement yesterday that indicated that if you carry a jerry can into the downtown core, into the footprint of the demonstration, you would be subject to being stopped, searched, and potentially charged in relation to aiding and abetting the demonstration moving ahead. While we were doing that and while we were engaged in those enforcement activities, we were also out at Coventry Road looking at how we could take off the larger stockpile of fuel that we knew existed. There is no single strategy to this. We will do everything in our power to disrupt and deter these people from remaining in our city so that the demonstrators pick up and leave. That includes multiple different prongs of enforcement that we are engaged in now and will increase over the days.
Yesterday, when we were at a press conference with the police chief, he was talking about how there was going to be strict enforcement of the no fuel moving into the downtown core. Literally at the same time, he was telling me that at the press conference, our crews were out downtown, saw wheelbarrows full of jerry cans going right by police officers. And when we asked the police officers why they didn't stop them, they said that, well, there might be water in there, so they're free to move into the area. Why should anyone in the city believe that the police are actually going to be able to enforce this when we have concrete examples of large amounts of fuel and jerry cans moving into the downtown core and the police standing by and doing nothing?
Yesterday, you saw us lay out the request for augmented resources to come into the city to help us manage the situation around the demonstration, around the occupation and the demonstrators that were in that area. One of the things we identified in early days is it was going to be really important for us to cut off the flow of fuel into that area. As you've just indicated through the pictures that you've taken, there are many different ways, different places that flow is coming in through. We believe that the 1,800 officers and civilian members that we've requested will help us harden up the perimeter of that will lead us to be able to have better success in interdicting fuel as it enters into the demonstration area. We are doing interdiction. There is no doubt. There were several charges yesterday, several seizures yesterday of gasoline. We also have the example where one of our members was swarmed during one of those interdictions. And ultimately, we had to bring a public order team in to help protect the member, effect the arrest, and take the subject and our members out of that area. It is important that we have the right number of officers, right number of members present to be able to safely effect those arrests and safely do those interdictions. That's why we've asked for the numbers of officers we had, to make sure that we can do the enforcement job that we know we need to do.
Why haven't the police considered removing the protesters before removing the vehicles? If local companies won't help seize the vehicles and impound them, also couldn't you just go to the military, who have lots of heavy recovery vehicles and the means to defend their personnel, and bring them in?
As we indicated early on in this, we're looking at all sorts of different options to safely, peacefully, and expeditiously end this occupation. Have these demonstrators removed from our street, have them moved from our street so that we can get back to life as normal in Ottawa. We look at all sorts of options for removing the vehicles and having the people who are in that area either leave willingly or leave through intervention by our police services. All of those options still remain on the table, and we will continue to look at how we manage the situation and what we need to do at any point to peacefully end this.
Downtown Ottawa residents have expressed they're very concerned about the images of the alleged arsonist starting a lobby fire at a condo building and then taping the doors shut. And I know that the police force has posted images of suspects. I'm just wondering if you can tell us about what police believed happened there. I appreciate you've said that there is an investigation underway and there's limitations on how much you can get into that. But is there any reason to believe there is a connection with the trucker protests, and have the suspects been identified?
We absolutely understand the community's concern around something as dangerous as that, so we actively are investigating it. I don't have an update for you on that now, but what I can tell you is I do know that incidents like that are creating great amounts of community concern in the neighborhoods that are surrounding this demonstration. Although we don't have any direct linkage between the occupation, the demonstrators, and that act, the community is at a heightened risk because of those activities. We take that very, very seriously, and that's why you've seen our increased presence in a surge capacity and our increased enforcement in those neighborhoods to try and ensure that those residents have safety and security in their own neighborhoods, in the houses that they live. I know today a community meeting is occurring between the local ward councillor and members of that building, and the Ottawa Police are actually a part of that meeting as well. In ensuring that people feel safe where they live is ultimately absolutely important to the Ottawa Police Service, and we are taking all steps to make sure that feeling of safety and security comes back.
We've already heard the federal government say that they are not prepared to talk to these convoy organizers. This afternoon, the public safety minister called them a small minority, very angry. It's no longer about truckers or vaccines. So given the federal government's position on that, I want to know, I haven't heard you say what the plan out of this is then. If they want to talk to the feds won't talk to them, and you're only in charge of logistics, you seem to be powerless to change anything.
We put an ask out for 1,800 officers, sworn and civilian members. We continue to work with our partners and with our planning teams to identify exactly where those officers are going to be coming from. We have had from the beginning of this, we've had absolute cooperation with many of our partners. The RCMP and the OPP have provided resources to us to help support us. Police services across Ontario have actually identified resources to come and help work with us. That cooperation absolutely continues, and we thank all of our policing partners for their help and assistance through this. In terms of how we move forward, we continue to look at how we have fruitful dialogue and discussions with leaders within the occupation, within the demonstrators. We have strong police liaison team assets who are deployed on a daily basis and have ongoing and regular conversations with these with the people who are leading this occupation. That is exceptionally important for us, that we continue to have those dialogues. As we move through, we will continue to look at all of the options we have. You've seen an increased enforcement presence from us. To date, we've had over 1,300 charges. We've had over 1,300 traffic violations identified. You've heard me lay out an overall investigative strategy to look at how we lay criminal charges, lay vehicle-related charges now and moving ahead. There is absolutely a need to end this. We are actively working to do it through peaceful, progressive negotiations, but we also have looked at enforcement angles to move us ahead.
I wanted to ask you again about this 1,800 officers that you're looking for. You mentioned earlier that you sort of need more officers in order to sort of harden that perimeter. So a lot of people are wondering why the city doesn't file sort of more injunctions to get the vehicles out of there. But if they did, would you actually be able to enforce that with the officers that you have at this point, or is it a resource issue?
So the 1,800 officers are for a multitude of different activities. You've heard us talking about hardening the area around the demonstration and around the occupation. It takes upwards of 400 plus officers a day to manage that footprint that we currently have and actively look to shrink that footprint. Beyond that, we know that we need legal resources. We know we need investigative resources to look at the investigative strategy that we are looking to implement to create increased enforcement activities. We know that we need public order assets to be here to support us, as was evident yesterday as we began to do fuel interdiction as it went into the site of the occupation. It is going to take, and we've identified a number of resources to come in and support us to end this. We are absolutely committed to ending this, and that's why we've made the large ask we had, so that we can have the presence we need to successfully, expeditiously, and quickly end this occupation.
My question concerns the staging areas being used by protesters. I understand that police have moved to dismantle the one at Confederation Park, but there's also a staging area on Coventry Road. I just want to know, does OPS know how many staging areas convoy protesters are currently using, and what's being done to discourage the establishment of further staging areas in suburbs like Vanier that could potentially essentially move some of the undesirable elements of these protests into other neighborhoods?
Right from the beginning of this, as we started to have discussions and bring planning around, we really strongly relied on gathering intelligence and information around the progress of the convoy across Canada. Ultimately, the initial weekend demonstration that led to the occupation we're currently seeing. We continue to work with partners between the OPP, the RCMP, the Sûreté de Québec, and the Gatineau Police to bring intelligence information in to identify things exactly like those fuel depots that we're seeing. We will continue to bring that information in, and as we learn about them and develop plans around them, we will actively shut them down, because we know they are a major source of contribution to keeping the activities of the occupation going.
You told us about an attack, and Mr. Slowly talked about injuries to some of your officers as well. Can you give us an idea of how many officers were injured and the kind of injuries that they suffered?
In terms of serious injuries to our officers, we're very fortunate to report that we haven't had any to this point. There has been, during altercations, some more minor injuries sustained by the officers, but nothing that has taken any of our members out of commission or not able to continue to provide policing services.
I wanted to ask Deputy Chief about the mood among the rank and file police force now. We've got a city basically questioning how you're doing your job. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what morale is like, and just as an aside to that, with bringing in these 1,800 additional resources, would that be a boost?
Our members are tired. They are very tired. They go out every single day down to our downtown core to try and take back a portion of our city that's been lost to this occupation. They work extremely hard in cold weather and extremely difficult conditions to manage this what is a demonstration and occupation, and they find it extremely challenging. The morale is challenged through this. There's no other way to put it. This is an extremely difficult job. They continue to work day in and day out. Some of our resources had to work 7 days straight, up to 18 hours a day, in order to keep the city safe. They've done an exceptional job, and I'm extremely proud of the work they're doing. Everything they do is here to help support safety and security in our community, and particularly to support the safety and security of the residents who are affected directly by this occupation. It has been a challenge for them. They continue to show up every single day and do amazing work. We asked for 1,800 officers, which is a big ask because our members need that help and support in order to bring this to an end. I'm glad you asked about our officers because this has been challenging for them, and I got to tell you, I'm proud of the work that they do every single day.
I just want everyone to know that the city is doing absolutely everything possible to help support the police in this, and we've had staff working very hard as well, and we're all very anxious to get this completed and over with. So please, know that we are working extremely hard to try and resolve this issue, and we're engaging all levels of government to try and do so.